Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to go ahead and replace some spark plugs on a 2013 Honda Accord Sport. It's an inline 4, and we have 106,000 miles, so it's about that time. We're going to point out some of the things that you probably should be using here. First, we're going to start with spark plugs. I had to do voiceover edition. Originally, I had just recorded this, but audio was terrible, and people kept making noise in the background, so you know how that goes. Anyways, the part number here is 91578. You're going to need 4 plugs, obviously, for a 4-cylinder engine. And I would suggest buying the more expensive plugs. NGK is considered an OEM retrofit here, and you could also use OEM directly from Honda. Do not use cheap plugs because they do not last. So even though they're much cheaper, you should always stay with the OEM plug, type plug. So in this case, you're going to be running close to $20 per plug, which I know sounds expensive. They can be had on eBay for much less. I think I got these for $65 directly from eBay. So that's up to you at your discretion, but I would definitely suggest spending a little bit of money. Next, we're going to look at some of the tools that would probably going to be using, but I don't think I ended up using these. These are needle nose pliers, and they're close quarter needle nose, and they're just for reaching in and getting the plug if it gets stuck. Also, here's a spark plug socket. This is a 9/16 inch socket because this is a direct injection motor. The plugs are thinner than normal, so you're probably going to have to go out and buy one of these 9/16 inch spark plug sockets. Next, we have a 3/8 inch ratchet with a 12-inch extension. You can use as long as you want, or attached extensions together, but I would definitely suggest having it as long as possible. Next, there's a 10mm socket that will be used to go ahead and remove various parts of the top. Okay, so I sped things up so you don't have to sit here and watch this all day, even though there's a lot to see here, and I'm trying to give you guys as much as possible. We're just going to go through removing the top here. It's just, I believe, 5 bolts. And this is a little bit sped up so that you can watch it, and you can just do this by hand. I wouldn't suggest using tools. You can, but you don't have to. So we're going to go ahead and take those out. I'm not going to actually pull them out. I'm actually going to leave them in and to just lift the cap off all by itself. Okay, so after this is done, we can go ahead and pop the cap off. Like I said, go ahead and leave the bolts in, therefore you don't lose them. And just move it off to the side. After this, we're going to go ahead and remove the coils. So there's a coil over each of the plugs. It's going to require a 10mm socket to go ahead and get those off. It's just a single bolt that's holding each one. And also there's the wire harness. The wire harness also should be removed before trying to remove the coils, because the coils are actually pretty long. So you want to go ahead and do that first. So you just press that in and it'll release the harness there. And now we'll go ahead and look at each one of the individual wires. So you should be able to do these by hand, with the exception of the one on the far left. The one on the far left is a little harder to get to, but just be careful. When you have a lot of miles in your car, there's a tendency here for the harness to want to snap or break, but the plastic on these seems pretty good, so I'm not too worried about it. I mean, it came off pretty easy, as you can see, but don't just press down. You see, I'll get my thumb under the bottom there and then press it out. It's so that you can give it a little leverage. You don't want to press all your pressure. Yeah, see what I'm doing, pointing here, is you don't want to push all the way down, because if it's going to break, it's going to just snap off right there. So just make sure to try to do that, or use a pair of needle nose. I was just doing this by hand to show you that you can do it by hand. It's just hard to do with the camera, obviously, because I only have one hand. If I had 2 hands, I could get both hands in there and get its release. Now I'm pointing out the one on the far left here, because you can see that there's not as much room to work with it, and on the bottom there's actually a lip that comes up on the actual cam cover that makes it harder. So I have my little camera helper helping me here, but as you can see, a little shaky cam going on at the same time. So there you go. I go ahead and release that, and I'm going to show you what it looks like here so far. You can see that it's pretty straightforward. You can blow this off at this point if you want to. If you want to have it cleaner, it's not required, but it just in case there's something that's going to fall into the plug holes. So there we go. We're going to loosen one at a time, and we're going to take the bolts out. It shouldn't be too tight. Just be very careful, because the cam cover is made out of composite material, not metal, and over tightening or putting too much on it can cause it to break. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the coil out. When you take the coils out, make sure to keep them in order. They want them to go in exactly the way they came out. You can also work one plug at a time if you want to do it that way as well. But I'm going to go ahead and take them all out and just keep them all in order. And then I'm going to go ahead and inspect inside each one of these holes, because there's a actual seal right there where the cam cover comes in contact with the head, and it can leak. So we're going to look here. There's a look at what the coil looks like. The coil is on top, and then there's a wire inside that connects to your spark plug. That's how the coil works. There's a 3-wire connection inside there. The computer just basically sends a signal to the ignition coil to fire, and that's how the cylinder is fired. So now I'm going to look inside and make sure that there's no leaking going on. You will still sometimes see some oil in there. If you see oil in there, it's time to replace the cam cover seal. It's a little more involved, but you shouldn't really have to do that. Usually these seals now last a lot longer than they used to, so we're good. All right, so once that's done, we're going to go ahead and start removing spark plugs. Now you can see what I'm doing here. I'm keeping my hand very stable and holding the extension very straight, because if you put too much, too much torque on it or pull it in a weird way, that will cause it to break the porcelain on the spark plug, and you don't want to do that. It doesn't matter so much for the old spark plug as it does for the new one. I didn't pull a lot of magnet in this, but sometimes a magnet helps if you can't get the plug out, because you'll see I'll go ahead and keep turning the plug here. And if you're lucky, the grommet will hold the plug and you'll be able to pull it out in one shot like I did there. So we're going to take an extreme close-up here. I took a mini microscope here and to show you guys what it looks like on the plug, and that's what a spent plug looks like. It's not, this one's not shot. That one's actually in pretty decent condition. It's just in used condition, but it has normal wear on the actual tip. So there's our new plug. We'll go ahead and compare it here to the old plug. Now you see on the white that a little bit of discoloration. That's normal. They do get some leakage every once in a while because of the heat. That will not affect the plug, how it works. It's just normal spent. So if you see that, don't get worried. It's normal. That happens. So there's your new plug. You can put some anti-seize on here. I'm choosing not to. Engine's cold. I don't plan on doing this too often. And I've never had a problem not using it. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten this in by hand. Always start by hand. And when I feel it stop, that's when I know to get the ratchet out, and you'll see what I do there when I get to that point. While we're waiting, oh no, we're already there. So we'll turn it until it stops. You'll feel like a stop. And once you hit there, it's about an 1/8 turn past that. There's a crush washer on the actual spark plug that squishes down when you make that last little 1/8 of a turn. And once you hit there, you're done. Do not over tighten spark plugs. It'll be the last thing you do on an engine, because it'll be so expensive to repair that you'll never want to touch an engine again. So remember, do not over tighten spark plugs. You can also use a torque wrench. I don't have the torque spec on me of what it is, but trust me, by hand, go tight, 1/8 of an inch past. Here's another close-up. This one's a little more damaged. You can actually see on the insulator where it has a small crack on the insulator. You can see it. It looks like a line. That one is definitely shot, but it's not our worst yet. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to go ahead and tighten it up until it stops. They're a little sped up for you, so we don't have to sit here and watch me turn spark plugs, but I'll go till it stops. And then it was a little 1/8 turn past that. And that's it. You keep going to the next plug. We're going to get another close-up of each one of these plugs. Actually, the 4th plug ended up being the one that had some problems. So look forward to seeing that in a second here. So here's our next plug. And I believe this one was in pretty decent condition. It wasn't too bad. So yeah, you can see me talking, but no words coming out. That one's fine. You can see there's no crack on the insulator. It's just normal wear. Doesn't look oil fouled or anything like that. So not bad at all. And I did notice a big difference. I'm going to say that right now. I never really expect to see a difference in spark plugs when I change them, but this is a manual transmission, and what I noticed as soon as I did it, my tip in on my clutch was much better. It felt like it was bogging a little bit, not terrible, but enough. But now it just goes right in, which means I'm getting a little bit more low end power, and that was more than likely because of this plug I'm about to take out, which is completely fouled and has a serious crack or fouling on the plug. And you see the fouling where the dark spot is. That means that it's not sparking properly. So, and it goes all the way down the side. And so that's this kind of plug is the reason why you're changing your spark plugs. And you can actually see on the tip where the electrode is that there's a dark spot on there as well, meaning that the iridium on the plug is not there anymore. So this happens. This is normal. You know, it has that many miles on it. This plug is not meant to last much past that. So yeah, you see the fouling on the plug. So the and this is also closest to the PCV system where it's pumping exhaust gases. I mean, not exhaust gases, but gases from the crankcase back into there. So that one's going to get the most oil fouled from oil vapor entering the intake system. So now this is where I got kind of fancy because I figured out I could just I wanted to take a look and I could just video record off of there, off my little video scope here, and that's the top of the piston right there. I'm sorry this video is not great. You should have done this at night, but I'm not taking the spark plug back out to do this at night. You don't want to keep removing spark plugs. Once they're out and once they're in, just leave them as they are. You shouldn't just keep removing them because the crush washer only crushes once. So that's what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and put a 45-degree angle on this too. I really should have done this at night or in a dark area, but that's the top of the piston, and you can see it's pretty clean. And there's some metal shards. It's not really metal shards, but it's what came off the spark plug when it was taken out. So it's a little bit of soft metal that fell in there. It's not going to hurt anything. But now I'm going to put a 45 on there, and if you look closely, and I apologize, I try to get two angles here. If you look, that's the threads for the spark plug. And let's see if we get a little farther here. I believe that I get a good shot of the valve. And people ask often if we get carbon buildup on the intake valves, and we do. All right, that's the exhaust valve. So you can see the exhaust valve is closed, and it's pretty clean. So I have to go ahead and flip this the other direction so I can get a shot of the intake valve, which should be open if it's not a compression stroke, but I don't think it is. So here we go. We're going back in, and this time we're going to try to get a shot of the intake side, and you'll see that there is some buildup. It's not terrible. It's not on the valve seat, so it's not plugging anything up, but it would definitely mean that if you have seafoam, that you probably want to do seafoam. Oh, there it is. You see it? You can see the valve. I'm sorry if this video doesn't come out great, but yeah, that you see a dark spot. That's the inside of the intake valve. And there's your second video on the right there of just kind of a close-up. But you can see there's goop on it. It's not terrible. I've seen way worse. But this would definitely bring me to want to go ahead and do a cleaning, either seafoam or something they can put on the intake side to try to clean this off. And you may ask, well, why does this happen? It happens because you have a crankcase ventilation system that has exhaust gases from the exhaust. I keep saying exhaust gases. That's not what I mean. Crankcase gases that are built up that need to be vented back into the engine because you don't want to put those in the atmosphere. So they send them back into the engine, and occasionally oil vapors build up. They condensate. You end up getting oil vapors going back in the inside, and because it's a direct injection motor, you end up having buildup because the injector's on the inside of the cylinder, so the gasoline can't clean that valve for you. The vapor coming in is stuck behind that valve, and if it builds up, it looks like that. So if this gets really bad, usually it will cause serious issues. So it's always good to go ahead and have one of those cleanings on the back side. Now, really bad buildup means that you actually have to take the head off and have the valves cleaned, which you don't want to do. That's a total nightmare. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one tightened up. Like I said, 1/8 of a turn, past tight. So you'll feel it stop, and then you'll feel right when it doesn't want to go. That's where you stop. So it's about 1/8 of a turn. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and drop the coils back in. Like I said, you can do these one at a time if you want to. You don't have to take them all out at once. I just did it because it's just the way I did it. But you can do it however you want. Like I said, this job is pretty straightforward, and I wanted to kind of be in depth with this and show you everything that is going on this. So I'm going to go ahead and just reassemble, get the bolts back in for each one of these coils. And you'll see that the wire harness is pushed out of the way, but not like overly bent. So be very careful when you handle your harnesses, especially when you have higher mileage, because plastic does become brittle. So everything you're dealing with on the top of this motor, you just want to be very careful with it. If it's new, it's not a big deal. And when you tighten these two, remember this is a composite cam cover, so that you do not want to over tighten those. Just, enough to just pass snug is fine. You'll feel it like make a creak, and that's pretty much where you want to stop. So now we're going to go ahead and plug the harnesses back in each one of the cylinders, and we're going to get kind of a close up here. And it's just basically the same. You want your fingers behind it and then press it in. Do not try to do it any other way, because then you take the chance that you'll break one of the harnesses. I've broken a lot of harnesses in my life because I've dealt with a lot of cars with a lot of miles, and the more miles, the more likely they are to break harnesses, and you don't want to do it. You just want to be careful, and like I said, do it the right way. Don't force anything, because it'll break. All right, so this just snaps back in, drops back in, and snaps. It's actually pretty nice. So now that's gone. That's finished. I think if you see that little red piece there, that's the PCV valve. That's the valve where it allows the exhaust gas. I mean, God, I am going to keep saying that crankcase gases to return back into the intake system. So I'm going to go ahead and put the cover back on here. I'll talk about the PCV system in a minute here. But I'm going to put the cover back on here. I didn't take any of the bolts out, so I just dropped it basically back on. Do not tighten any of these fully. Just get them on there snug, because if you tighten any of them up, and then it might have one of the other bolts become not aligned. So you just want to make sure that you go ahead and do it the same way. You want to have them on kind of just, loosely, so you can adjust the cover to make sure that it's on there properly, and then go ahead and tighten them up. You want to start from the middle and move out when you do that. So I thought I went ahead and fast forward this spot, but guess not. So now this is going to go ahead and get tightened up, and we're pretty much finished here, but I think I worked backwards because I ended up going back and showing you the PCV valve. I like the valve that Honda used. It's a different type than they normally do. It appears to have an oil separator part where it's trying to get the oil out of the system, because that's the biggest problem, is that no matter what you do, especially if you overfill your oil, don't overfill your oil. That's the biggest thing. This is what will cause you major pain. You overfill your oil, oil will get back into that PCV valve, and it will back into your intake. So there it is. It has one bolt on the bottom. It's a 10 millimeter. The harness has to come out to get to that. It's pretty easy, but it means I have to take the whole top part again, which I wasn't happy about. There's if you look on the right side of my hand, I'm sorry, but it's hard to see. That's just clipped on. It actually will slide off if you push it forward, but you have to take the bolt off the left side in order for the harness to give you enough space. So you see right there, you see how I took that bolt out. Now that'll slide, and that'll allow you to take the harness off this side. Yeah, so it just clips on. It's not a big deal. Then you can access to that bottom bolt, and like I say, you see that hole, those holes in there, those are oil separator holes, so that allows the vapor to get through, but hopefully not oil. But if you overfill your oil will go back through this and feed back into the intake. And like I said, because you're a direct injection motor, there's nothing to clean that oil out or help clean that oil, and it'll never do a perfect job, but it would keep the valves a little cleaner. But that doesn't happen here, because all it's coming through that side of the valve is air. So don't overfill your oil. Starter location. We had somebody ask about the starter. I apologize. This is the best video I could get, but because it's tight under there. So I am under the center of the motor, and you can see it. That's the starter. There's the exhaust pipe coming down. I'm on the back side of the motor. It's pretty much right in the middle behind it. That's the axle. You can see right there, they're going to the passenger side. Right above that axle, you have your starter. There's one bolt that's pretty accessible, and that's the one I keep kind of flashing on. There's some harnesses on top for the different negative and positive connections. So you'll need to get that one bolt right. I'm on it, and then I'm off of it. So I apologize for that. So you want to get basically 2 bolts out of it on the starter, and then there's obviously various connections that connect the power. Thanks for watching, and leave comments below, and subscribe if you want to see more.